Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Big Intentions podcast. I'm your host, Iralyn, and today's episode, it's going to be a great one. So let's just get right into it. Let's get after some of the housekeeping things. If you're new to the podcast, you can either listen to the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and I would love if you could leave a 5-star review or rating on either of those platforms. Or if you're watching this, you found me on YouTube, then you can feel free to subscribe, like the video, comment, let me know what you all think of this episode, future podcast ideas you want me to talk about. All of the things. I'm so excited for today's episode. It's going to be a fun one. I'm going to be discussing celebrating your wins. So that's always a fun time over here. I'm trying a new recording, techie things, like in the lab kind of vibe. So if I'm looking at my computer, that's why. Also, I script out my podcast just so it helps me stay on track. And usually I do this on like notes, but this time I did it in my journal and I wrote things out. And so I think that'll be good. So if I'm reading, that's what I'm reading. I'm reading the topic for today. It was helpful for me to actually journal it today. So let me get this situated. Okay. So it's so exciting to be back on the podcast, and the majority of the podcast episodes so far, I feel like are very focused on obviously setting intention, setting up systems and routines, really focused on the journey and the progress and setting goals for yourself, becoming the highest version of yourself, which obviously that's the point of the podcast, is to becoming the highest version of yourself. I'm here to discuss with you all of those types of things, but I also think it's important to celebrate your wins. And that's something that I want to talk about in today's podcast episode. And it's something that I've really been thinking of lately. It's a concept that's kind of been coming up for me. Because I feel like my natural tendency is to celebrate, but sometimes I don't allow myself to celebrate, and it's easy to get caught up in the go, 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 the hustle and bustle of life, and to neglect the progress that you're making towards your goals and becoming the highest version of yourself. So I know last week I mentioned that I'm an Enneagram 7, which I just took it's a little personality quiz if you don't know what it is. But I'm a 7, and a 7 loves to celebrate. That's so true for me. And so that's a huge part of who I am. And I want to continue to exemplify that in my life, because I just think, one, it makes life so much more fun when you're celebrating it. You're celebrating life, celebrating things that are happening in your life, celebrating other people, all of the things. And I really want to dive into this topic, what it looks like to celebrate yourself, the small wins, the big wins. Why should you celebrate? Why is that important? And then actually how to celebrate. So obviously it's going to be kind of a more fun topic that we're talking about today, but it does have a deeper meaning, and there is reason behind celebrations. So that is what we're going to get into today. And so I'm excited about that, but let's dive into the segments. I'm going to be diving into living out loud. So the most recent update is I celebrated my 200 spins at Cycle Bar since I lived in Texas. So that's since last February. And honestly, I was like, wow, 200 is a lot when you kind of think about it. That's a lot of spinning. It's not every single day, but it's a lot. And, I love spin. It's something that I've really enjoyed, especially since moving to Texas. I really have found my groove with it. And it's just such a special place. I met such amazing people through it. And so celebrating that this past week was so exciting and fun. And I loved it. Everything about it was so awesome. So obviously they played Jack Harlow for me, because it wouldn't be a celebration without Jack Harlow, if you know what I mean. So I thought that was fitting that, I'm talking about celebrating, and that was kind of some of the inspiration for this podcast episode was that. But really, I've been just kind of vibing, reading. I'll get into all my content recs in the next little portion of Living Out Loud. But yeah, I just think I've just been getting after it and trying to be active, enjoying life, whatever, trying to get back into routines a little bit. I've been journaling more, doing my morning pages. But overall, life is good. Really no huge updates or anything. yeah, I feel like it was just like getting back into the swing of things after that. Like last week was so weird with the 4th of July on the Tuesday and everything. It was just strange, you know? And so now we're chilling, we're vibing, we're back in routines. It's still so hot here in Texas. But really, other than that, everything is good. Life is good. No complaints over here. So also, it's Amazon Prime Days has been going on this week, so that's kind of been fun. I got some goodies, which I'm excited about. Yeah, so maybe I should start implementing like a favorite of the week or something in this little podcast like intro, because I love when podcasts like talk about their favorites. So that's always fun. I love a content rec, but I also love like a favorite. So my favorite this week, honestly, would probably be this Sloppy Joe recipe that I found on TikTok. Love finding a TikTok recipe. So I found this one, Sloppy Joe's. It honestly was so easy too, and it's been a good one. That's probably would be my favorite for the week. I've been enjoying cooking at home and just like finding new recipes to try too. So let's move into some of the content recs. So I started reading The Gap and the Gain, which is a book, nonfiction self-help kind of book. And Kinsey Elizabeth was like talking about this book, promoting it on her Instagram. And I was like, oh, let me find this. I think it's literally $3 on Amazon, so I can link it below if you guys want. But anyways, it's called The Gap and the Gain by, I think, Dr. Sullivan, something Sullivan. And it's such an amazing book. I'm only like 50 pages in so far, and it's really already making a huge impact. The concepts in this book are really like hitting home for me. And it's stuff that I've heard before, but it's just the way that it's presented. It's really, dots are being connected, if you know what I mean. So basically, the concept of the book in general, the gap and the gain. The gap, you're in the gap if every time you measure yourself, you're measuring your situation against the ideal. And the gain is measuring yourself against where you started. So it's just basically having a different perspective of your goals and dreams and looking at things. And it kind of ties into like celebrating things, honestly, looking at things from where you're at today compared to where you were versus, that's the gain, and the gap is comparing yourself to where you want to be. And I think this is really good for me. Like, obviously the name of the podcast is Big Intentions. Like, I do have big goals and dreams, and the book isn't telling you to not have those. It's just reframing the way that you think about those things and being present in the here and now. And this could be a whole topic. Like, I could literally deep dive on this book and go through my learnings of the book, which I plan to do in a future podcast episode. But I really wanted to mention it because if you guys are interested, or if you're an overachiever, then this kind of book is really beneficial and helpful to reframing your mindset and stuff. So just wanted to shout that book out. That's one of those like nonfiction reads. I just read like 10 pages a day. So it takes me a minute sometimes to get through it, but I've been on the treadmill, like getting my step on. And honestly, it's a good like book to read then if you're like trying to habit stack. So I would recommend that book. I guess if we're just going into books, I just finished The Summer of Broken Rules by, not sure who it's by, but it's inspired by Taylor Swift songs. And if you're not a huge Swiftie, you won't even notice. They literally mention Taylor Swift specifically like a couple times. I think if you were a Swiftie, you would pick up on more references of the songs throughout the book, but I didn't, and it didn't like diminish the quality of the book or anything. And it's a book club read for me and my friends. So that's our July pick. So I was really, trying to get through it because I just have a lot of books I want to read. Like summer vibes, because there are certain books that like, if I'm reading The Summer of Broken Rules, I'm not trying to read that in November. That's just like not the vibe. So you have to really cram in the summer books. So that was one I read. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5. I would recommend it. It was cute. It was really fun. Also, did you guys know that reading vlogs are a thing? And I definitely want to do one soon. But basically people just take you along like the journey of reading a book, and you just would have to look one up because it sounds kind of strange, like what you just watch somebody silently reading a book, but that's not what it is. And reading talk and reading YouTube, like it's a whole community, which I definitely want to try to be a part of. It's like, that's the dream, right? Just like reading, telling people about the books you're reading. Like, I love that. That's so fun. And so basically, The Summer Broken Rules, I would recommend it. My next read, I started it the other day, and I'm really enjoying it so far. It's called My Summer Darlings. And this one, it's actually set in, I think, East Texas. So not that I'm from Texas or anything, but like I'm here. They've mentioned Dallas several times. So I think it's kind of like fun and relevant to me. But I've heard mixed reviews on this. I think it only has like a 3.5 on Goodreads. It doesn't have a ton of reviews. It might be a new book. I'll have to look into that. But I've been enjoying it, and I think it's like a thriller-esque. I think there's some twists happening. So anyways, that's my current read, and I'm enjoying that. So out of books, we can move into podcasts because I haven't recommended a podcast, I don't think, in a while. And I have like heard of this influencer before, Peyton Sarton, but I haven't really ever like followed her or really like listened to our podcast or anything. The podcast is called Note to Self, and she had the Gals on the Go on her podcast, and I was like, oh, well, I like listening to them. Let me listen to this podcast. And so then I was like, well, I do need a new podcast to listen to, so let me like jump on this train and just go on a deep dive and like listen to some of her more recent episodes. And so I did that, and I started following her on Instagram. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm like really enjoying her podcast, like her maturity, just like the way that she frames things, and just in general, the concepts that she discusses are like a little bit deeper than most podcasts that I listen to. And I just really have appreciated that. And so I've been enjoying that. And I most recently listened to her podcast episode with her dad, and he's like a fighter pilot. And it was honestly such a good listen. And I would recommend that episode to, I don't know, anybody. It was about like finding things that fuel you and things that will drive you to success and like finding your path or whatever. And so that was a really fun episode. So I enjoyed that. And then in terms of movies, I've really kind of been on a kick with the movies. So I went and saw No Hard Feelings with Jennifer Lawrence, which I love Jennifer Lawrence. Fun fact, she actually is from Kentucky, if you don't know. And I don't think she like loves to claim that though. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are like that from Kentucky, which is sad because it's such a beautiful state. I mean, there's not a lot going on, but like, you know, I could see how it could wrong you because it's such like a small town vibe. Like everywhere there is such a small town vibe. But I don't know. I'm protective of Kentucky now, and I didn't used to always be that way. So anyways, I don't think she's like super proud Kentuckian or anything. But moving on, so that movie, very provocative, and like, you know, you just look up like the trailer for it, but it was really funny and I enjoyed it. So that was a good watch. And then recently I saw this TikTok. It was like movies you need to watch to prepare for the Barbie, like the Barbie movie. And so basically one of the movies on this list was called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, or some French sounding city. And it was set in like the 40s or 50s or something. And it's like these French people, so there's like subtitles, and it's a musical. So really two things that I'm not super into, musicals or movies with subtitles. Like I love a subtitle, but just not if it's in a different language usually. But anyways, I was like, oh, like Spence, pick a movie from this list, and that's the one he picked. So we were compromising. And anyways, it was actually a really good movie, and I was vibing with it, and I was so into it. It was such a good movie. I would recommend it. I think it was on, I want to say like HBO or something is where we found it. So that was a good movie. And then we were just kind of like in this like, ooh, let's watch another like good movie. And this one was called The Worst Person in the World. And I think it's on Hulu. And this was actually a super fun movie too. It was another subtitle movie, but it was not rom-com, but it's like this girl trying to find herself and like what makes her happy. And she makes all these mistakes along the way. And like, basically she's the worst person in the world. She like is selfish and ruins other people's lives because she doesn't care, you know? So anyways, that was another good movie. And then another one on the list for the Barbie movie was A Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, which I got like halfway through. And then Disney was like, yeah, you don't have a subscription. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't even know how it let me on here. But anyways, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that movie with Lindsay Lohan. And I remember like it forming my childhood and like my teenage years, my actual like existence as like my personality is so influenced by Lindsay Lohan, which now that I think like Freaky Friday, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, like those two are like literally so similar. Oh, Mean Girls, like Lindsay Lohan, honestly, I relate. Like we're the same in those movies. Like I totally feel her vibe. Anyways, moving on, intentional living. That's all my summer, not summer. That's all my content recs for you all. I feel like that's a lot, but like I just like to keep up to date with what people are watching and what's going on, you know? So anyways, intentional living. Last week, I think I said I wanted to be nicer and like more calm and compassionate. And I actually think I was because I made an effort to be. So if you're intentional about something, you know, you'll see progress and change in those areas. So that's a reminder for you all. Like when I do the intentions of the week, I also am encouraging you to do the intention with me, like set your own intention and then like comment or whatever, what your intention is, or DM me if you don't want to put it on the internet and be like, yeah, I set my intention. Like, here's my check-in. Like I would love to hold each other accountable. That's why I have this segment. And so my intention for this week is really just continuing to be dedicated to my routines and my non-negotiables for the days. Like the morning pages is really critical for my mental, and it's something I like. Moving my body, getting my steps in, you know, continuing to eat things that are just being in my routine really is the goal. I need to drink more water. Like I should have sat down with the water right now because I am so thirsty. Anyways, it's fine. So those are some of my intentions for the week. And then we can just move right into words to live by, which will obviously tie us into the main topic for the episode. And this week I wanted to find something from this book, which is Journey to the Heart by Melody Beattie. And I wanted to find something that kind of tied into today's podcast episode on celebrating your wins. And so I found one. And so this is going to be a little bit longer. So like, just bear with me. I'm just going to like read through it. But I thought it was really good and important to read. And it's honestly a little bit better than like a Pinterest quote that I would have found. So we're going to go with this. So again, this is Journey to the Heart. And this is on this meditation. They're like daily meditations in this book. And this one is titled Reward Yourself. So it goes like, take time to reward yourself. Let it become a deliberate and practiced habit. Many of us grew up in families or with people who didn't reward us. We weren't rewarded for good behavior. We weren't rewarded or loved unconditionally just for being, and particularly for being us. Although many of us may strive to change that behavior, rewarding the people around us, we may have neglected the importance of rewarding someone very important, ourselves. It is one thing to mentally congratulate ourselves for a job well done. It is another to take the time to actually, deliberately, and specifically reward ourselves. How many years do we have to live before it's time to treat ourselves? How much good do we have to do before it's good enough to give ourselves a gift? Maybe it's time right now, today, to begin practicing the habit of rewarding ourselves. Our souls can become tired, very weary of striving to grow, to do things well, to do our best at life, love, and work if there is no reward. Our passion can wane if good is never good enough, and if the rewards and pleasure are always at bay, somewhere out in the distant future. If you find yourself beginning to resist working hard, doing well, striving for spiritual growth, maybe it's because you're neglecting to reward yourself for all you've already done. If you feel like the world offers no reward to you, maybe it's because you're not cooperating by rewarding yourself. Stop punishing and depriving yourself. Don't let others punish you for a job, a day, or a life well done. Instead, reward yourself. Take a break and do something especially nice for you, something that would make you happy. Buy yourself something. It can be a little gift or you can splurge. Take yourself somewhere you want to go, in your hometown or in another country. Do something fun, magical, and exciting, something that makes your heart sing and your spirit soar. Reward yourself by allowing yourself to enjoy what you give yourself or what you're doing. Make rewarding yourself an attitude. Reward yourself often when you accomplish a particular task, when you've gone through a grueling part of your healing process. Reward yourself during those frustrating times just for being so patient. Sometimes reward yourself just for being you. Literally, like, the whole podcast right there in this little meditation, like, I am obsessed with this book, and this was perfect. Like, this was everything that I was trying to say, and obviously I'll expand on all of this, but like, this was exactly like the message that I was trying to get across in this podcast episode. And just to like highlight some of the things that I think are so important, it was talking about, you know, how long do you have to wait before you reward yourself? Like, you don't have to wait until you finish the big, huge goal. You have like the house, the family, the kids, the car, whatever, like all of that stuff. You don't have to wait until the big things to celebrate yourself and reward yourself now. And like, the whole thing of like, oh, treat yourself. Like, I think, yeah, like that can be overdone. Like, people just treat themselves for just being them, which I think is important at times if you're going through, you know, like this mentioned, like if you're going through like something hard, like hardship, and you know, you need a little bit of light in the darkness, you know, I think that's important. But like, some people will treat themselves like all the time. And, you know, I'm guilty of that too. But also, like, sometimes you just need those little things in the day-to-day to get you through, and that's okay if that's what gets you through. But honestly, I just think this whole passage was like, I just want to keep reading it because it's so good. And like, I just love the idea that, you know, if you find yourself like kind of like, why isn't the world rewarding me? It's like, maybe because you're not rewarding yourself and you're not noticing your progress. Maybe there are things to celebrate. And this was a quote like not long ago, but it's all about perspective and noticing the little things. And I think same thing with rewarding yourself. Like, look how far you've come and look how much you've already done. And really, that leads so seamlessly into the podcast episode on celebrating your wins. And I just think that, one, if you need this book is so good, just like day-to-day little reminders, stuff like that. Like, that's just a daily meditation, and it's just stuff you need to hear. And it's just important to, you know, content, if you want to consume content, like consume something like that. That's stuff that actually fuels your soul and gets you excited about the day-to-day, and I think that's important. And so just really diving into this topic on celebrating your wins. So what does it mean? You know, in this passage, it was talking about some ways to celebrate, like buying yourself a gift. It was more than just noticing, and I'll get into how to celebrate, but really, celebrating your wins, self-celebration is celebrating the person you are now, not your future self or the person you wish you could be. It's about accepting, encouraging, and empowering yourself in the moment. And you can celebrate who you are anytime or any place for any reason. And it's okay to do that. And it's not that you have to publicly display your celebrations. Like, I think that is good, and it's nice to celebrate with others. But the point of today's episode is celebrating yourself and celebrating your wins, because honestly, it's a lot of the times that you want to celebrate your personal victories because people don't really always see or understand what all goes into accomplishing these things. Like, people think that these TikTokers or whatever are maybe like overnight success, and maybe some of them they just went viral. But a lot of times it's like they're putting in all of this hard work, or, you know, you've been working towards something for months or years, and people only see like the celebration at the end. They don't see all the grit and the grind in the day-to-day. And, you know, that's why these big moments are always like so short-lived. And that's the point of celebrating the wins now along the way. And when you're in the grit, when you're in the grind, celebrating these small things is so important because it's fueling you to get to the end goal. But also, it's just a good reminder that like you are making progress and you are doing something, reminding yourself why you're doing something. And that's why I think it's just so important to celebrate your wins. So I kind of wrote just some stuff, and I'm just going to read through this because my brain was flowing, and like, we'll just see what I said. Like, I was out by the pool, just writing this one day. And so I don't know. I just think it's my thoughts on celebrating your wins, and I just want to share them with you. So it's easy to get caught up in the grind and just keep grinding and get sucked into the hustle and bustle. And, that's what a lot of like this culture of like the boss babes and like my 5 to 9 before my 9 to 5 and all of this, it's just so much about the grind. And it's good to grind, it's good to work hard, but the celebration of your progress is essential to your continuation and building up your confidence. If you reward yourself and notice and take time to acknowledge the progress that you've made so far, you will be fueled up and restored to continue working towards your goals and dreams. The quote about stopping and smelling the roses is a great example of celebrating your wins. And I just think it's such a good depiction because along the journey, along the path towards your goals, if you stop to focus on the greatness that's around you, that's where you see the beauty of life. You see the fruits of your labor, and celebrating that is important, not just when you reach your end destination, but all along the way, stopping and smelling the roses. And so another like piece of imagery, I just love like a metaphor. Like I love, not a metaphor, but I just love like an image of like, this is what I'm trying to say, but like, let me put it in really simple terms and give you an illustration of that. But imagine a gardener or a farmer day after day, waking up early, waiting, watering the plants and tending to their garden. If they don't celebrate their crop at all stages and take notice of how far they've come, they could be easily discouraged. And so if they're only rejoicing and celebrating when the crop starts producing fruit, then their celebration will be short-lived. Most of the time and effort went into planting the seed, tending to the garden, all of these little things they did every single day. That's where most of their time was spent, and a lot shorter amount of time is going to be spent harvesting the crop and actually, selling the fruits or whatever. So that is why it's so important to really like along the way, because so much of the time that you spend just in the day to day is really where all of the progress is made. And at the end of the journey, that's why it's so short lived. And that's why it's so important to really celebrate the small things along the way. So this is why it's essential to measure yourself against where you started versus versus your ideal, kind of like going back to the gap and the gain that I talked about. So the disappointment would be evident if you compare the seed in the ground to the fully blooming flower or the fully, like the crop when it's ready to be harvested. If you're comparing the seed to that, then if you look at the progress, that's going to be like, oh, my seed's just in the ground, or like I just have this little tiny plant growing. It's not even close to full bloom and like time to harvest it. If you're comparing the seed in the ground to this little thing, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, look how far I've come. But if you're comparing that little thing to the full bloom, it's like kind of discouraging. And so I think that's a good depiction of measuring yourself like where you started versus your ideal self or your highest version of yourself. And this is why it's important to celebrate your wins and progress along the way and along the journey. Now the question becomes, how do we celebrate ourselves? And I'm not talking about like the participation trophy that like kids get in their school or sporting events or whatever, like everybody gets a trophy. I'm more so focusing on the recognition of your steps towards your goals, no matter how big or small these steps and strides may be. And it's really about being intentional in the day-to-day and fueling your success, because by making progress, you're getting closer and closer to achieving your goals, and that progress deserves to be celebrated. It can do a couple things when you're celebrating. One, it can bring you back to the here and now, reining you back in from your head being in the sky or your head's in the clouds, whatever that saying is. Instead of really being so focused on the end destination, celebrating your wins along the way, along the path, can bring you back to the here versus being there and wanting to be there and never being focused on where you're at now and being grateful for how far you've come. And two, it can accelerate your progress by, if you recognize how far you've come, that will begin to build self-confidence in you, and that will only fuel your success. So be proud of who you are, how far you've come, and what you've done so far. And I want you to take a moment now and think about 3 accomplishments that you've had in your life. And just, think about them, write them down, and really just take a minute to be proud of yourself and think about, these are my 3 accomplishments. And now think about how you've celebrated those things in the past, or how you continue to celebrate those things, or did you even celebrate them at all? And I think this is a good application and like a good journal prompt is to actually sit down and be like, okay, what are my accomplishments? What have I accomplished? How have I celebrated these things in the past? And to reflect on that, and then to make a game plan for how you want to celebrate things in the future, because I do think it's important to celebrate your wins. And so now let's talk about how do you actually celebrate your wins. And one way to do this is stopping to take a moment and reflect on the progress you've made. So first of all, you have to recognize when you have a win, when you're making progress. You have to acknowledge that in order to be able to celebrate it. One way you could do this, maybe reflecting, it's something small and you just want to journal about it and journal about the accomplishment, write down how you're grateful for getting this far and how far you've come, and just really taking time to be intentional with yourself and reflecting on that. And celebration is about the recognition, and it doesn't have to be something elaborate or expensive when you're trying to celebrate something. It can really simply just be like acknowledging yourself and being proud of yourself and just the way that you talk to yourself. Sometimes celebrating the wins might just look like literally like an affirmation or a mantra and being like, I am so proud. Every time you get out of a spin class or every time you complete a workout, I am so proud of myself and my body and how far that I've come from where I started, and I think that's one way that you could celebrate yourself. But if you're like me and you want to be a little bit more elaborate with your celebrations, which I think is totally okay, and you should be elaborate as you want to be. So the key isn't just celebrating the big things though, and that's what it kind of feels like when you are more elaborate about your celebrations of your wins, but it can be anything that's propelling you towards your goals and making you a better person. That's anything that you could celebrate. You can make it into a win. Anything that's making you into the highest version of yourself is a win. And so another way to celebrate would be to set up milestones. So for example, once you've got so far towards this goal, you already have these predetermined rewards for yourself. And that's one way you could, kind of hold yourself accountable, because if you're someone who really gets sucked into the grind and the hustle and bustle, then maybe it's really hard for you to notice your wins. And so one way to do this would be setting up milestones. So I'm just going to use a personal example. Like for spin, I was really wanting a pair of spin shoes. And I was like, well, one, I want to be consistent with this and know this is something that is going to be a part of my life to invest in this, pair of spin shoes or whatever. But it also was more of a fun reward for me if I said, okay, when I get to 50 rides, I'll buy the pair of spin shoes. Okay, now if I get to 100 rides, I'll buy a new workout set. And setting up milestones like that, well, with spin, it's kind of easy, but I think that just makes it so much more fun. It makes me look forward to those milestones and those goals. And I would just recommend that if you're somebody who it takes a lot for you to actually stop and recognize yourself and reward yourself. I think setting up milestones is a great way. If I journal every single day this week, at the end of the week, I'll buy myself a new journal. Stuff like that, it gives you more incentive to accomplish your goals, but it also is helpful if you just aren't good at being intentional about that. It just kind of helps set up a system to allow you to celebrate yourself. So another kind of way to celebrate would be spontaneous celebrations. like just celebrating that you're alive, like just literally celebrating anything. If there's a reason to celebrate, you should celebrate. And okay, like you make it through the work week, so every Friday you get coffee out. I think that's like just such a simple example, but it's so fun. It makes you look forward to something, and it really just brings like the simple little pleasures of life and makes them like joyful and exciting. And that's another reason to celebrate your wins, is just because it makes life so much more exciting. It makes working towards your goals so much more exciting. Like, for example, like your savings goals. If you're like, every time I save $100, I don't know if spending money obviously wouldn't really be the reward, but maybe it's like every time that you get to this certain goal, you know, you celebrate. Maybe you spend $5 on like, I don't know what, besides coffee, like on like a juice or something. I don't know, something like that. But honestly, just spontaneous celebration is always really fun, and just like, oh, you got a raise, like let's go get drinks or whatever, just something like that. It's just fun to celebrate and being spontaneous about it. Another kind of way to celebrate, and I think this could be for small wins, but personally I've done this for like my bigger wins in life, and it's tokens of remembrance. So I don't have it, I'm not wearing it right now, but when I graduated college, my parents, you know, wanted to get me a graduation gift, which was so nice of them. And so I wanted to get something that I could look at and wear, and basically I wanted a piece of jewelry. So I got a ring, and I was able to customize it with the jeweler. So like actually being intentional about the whole process made it really fun, because I was able to design it, and like I knew the meaning behind the ring was I graduated college, like I went through 4 years of a grueling degree, like industrial engineering is no joke, like, you know, whatever. And so it was like, oh my gosh, like all my hard work, it's like I wear it almost every single day, and it signified something that, you know, I'm proud of myself for being able to work this hard, getting through honestly so much stress, anxiety, tears, blood, like all the things, and having a token of remembrance. If you're somebody who's a visual person, I think that's like a really fun way to celebrate your wins, something that will always remind you of like what actually went into the win. Because like the big celebration is awesome and fun, and like the end goal is so fun, but like when I look at that ring and I think of like my school and my degree and my 4 years in Louisville, it's like, oh, it was just so much more than actually walking across the stage. It was like so much more than just wearing the cap and gown. You know what I mean? It's just like so much more went into it, and having that token of remembrance was something that I think is really important to me. So, you know, if you have something coming up, like, you know, you're close to a big goal, I mean, it doesn't have to be that elaborate, but if you want it to be, like, may as well celebrate a big win, you know, as big as you can. And so I just think it's really fun to make it something like a visual, or like hanging up pictures of your graduation, hanging up your degree. Like if you have the diploma, I haven't done this, but like I need to get that framed and just hang it up. And seeing that every day and being like, wow, I'm proud of myself. And that just builds your confidence, and really, it's like a whole cycle. It's like, oh, I did that, I can do anything. And it's just like building this confidence in seeing your previous success too is something that is a great way to like constantly be celebrating that thing. Like, you know, it's a big deal. Make things a big deal if you want to. And so that kind of just leads me into the last way to celebrate, which is really not about yourself, but it's about celebrating others, which I think is so important. And like, I love to celebrate other people's birthdays, like milestones that they've made. It's just so fun when you're celebrating with others. It's really special and it means a lot. And like, for example, my spin 200 rides, like one of my friends at Spin gave me a candle, and I mean, one, what a sweetheart. Like that was so nice of her and so thoughtful. But honestly, it's like celebrating, like the fact that somebody else noticed your win and wants to celebrate with you, that's the piece that really means something. You know, writing somebody a card when they make some milestone, or just like somebody got a new job, and like sending a congratulations text, and just being a little bit more intentional with your words there. I just think it's so important to celebrate other people because it just proves that life is worth celebrating, and it's just so much more fun when you're celebrating with other people, obviously. But that is really all I have to say about celebration, celebrating people's wins, celebrate your wins. I really hope this episode resonated with at least one person, and I'm super excited about this episode. I think it's so fun. This is my 11th podcast episode. Like, that's something to celebrate. Like, every week I come in here, I pour my heart out on the camera, on the mic, and it's just fun. And honestly, it's like, even if just one person gets something from this, I am like so thankful, so glad that you all are supporting me. And, hopefully you do gain something from these episodes. That's the whole point of me recording them. But it's a great release for me too. And like, just to talk about stuff, like I love talking about deep topics. So if you have something you want me to talk about, you're like, Iralyn, research this thing and like talk about it on your podcast. Like, I would love to do that. So give me some ideas in the comments, DM me. You can find me on Instagram at Iralyn12, or, this YouTube channel, you can follow me, Iralyn Hunt on YouTube, subscribe, all the things. But I love you guys, and thanks so much for listening or watching today's podcast episode. And I hope to see you guys soon. Love you. Bye.